discipline needs to be present.
Yeah.
Because lack of discipline is not the answer.
I think it's also having that conversation with your spouse or future spouse of like, what has worked? What doesn't work? You've got to get curious, you guys, and ask just a lot of deep questions. And because the more you know, the more that you can walk that out in a way that the kids are going to receive it, and it's going to be positive.
It's never too late to sit down and create a parenting plan.
Yeah.
Like, it's very simple. What kind of parent are you? Each spouse understand how they were parented. I think those are conversations that a lot of times we don't have in the dating process of like, hey, what was discipline like for you? What are we going to do in those situations? How are we going to parent?
Your blended family has a 100% chance of success when you do it God's way. We're Blended Kingdom Families, and we want to provide biblical resources to heal and restore families with a message of hope for the next generation.
Hey guys, welcome back to the BKF podcast. We are super pumped to be with you today. If you haven't already, take an opportunity, like, share, comment. Please leave a review on this podcast or your thoughts on this topic. This is going to be a hot topic that we're
leave your
cover today.
comments, like put some comments in the chat. We want to hear what you think or if you have any questions.
I love it.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of questions at BKF, and so we're going to jump into this one. We've done a lot of podcasts on parenting. I know that out of 300 podcasts, we've done a lot on parenting.
Yeah.
But this is always one that we want to come back to because it is a consistent driver of dissatisfaction in blended families.
Yeah.
And for pretty obvious reasons. So the question is, or the statement is, my husband and I can't get on the same page with parenting. What suggestions and advice do you have?
Yeah.
Wow.
We experience this a lot in coaching. Yeah. So Scott and I coach a lot of couples together. And so this is one that we have a couple that are currently experiencing this. And again, like you said, it's a huge divider in blended families, especially with spouses. The American Psychological Association says that 40% of couples report that differences in parenting styles are a significant source of conflict in their relationship, while the Pew Research Center says 71% of parents say that disagreements about discipline affect their relationship with their partner. So this can be a big source of contention in your marriage. And especially with blended families, we know the statistics around second marriages, third marriages, the divorce rates, and we see a lot of this being a driver in between spouses. And this is where the loyalties get split of, okay, well, now I'm going to choose my kid over the spouse. And, so we want to be on the same page with discipline. We want to be on the same page with parenting. And let that be a unified thing that, you do together with your spouse.
Well, and it's not just, you're not just parenting in a vacuum. You're also parenting with other parents that are not in your house.
Right.
So discipline becomes this kind of foggy thing of, is it my turn to discipline? Is it their week to be disciplined? Does discipline follow wherever the child goes? So lots of disconnectors here with style and effectiveness. And what we're really, as parents, trying to do is we're either trying to extinguish behaviors in our children or encourage other behaviors in our children. And a lot of times we don't agree because we don't see the results. And those results may not be immediate. They may be long-term results, but either way, we're not seeing them.
Yeah.
So there's an opportunity to find your other parent's effectiveness and discipline very ineffective,
right?
Which in turn, because the tentacles go deep here,
right?
Lack of bonding, lack of respect, lack of all kinds of things that all crumble to the volcano of, well, your discipline style's wrong or your parenting style's wrong. And that's where so much conflict occurs, not only in blended families, but just in nuclear families. So much conflict occurs.
Oh, yes. And understanding, you guys, there are, God made us all beautifully unique, and our children are very unique, and they're very different. So how they receive discipline, how they receive love, it's going to be different for each child. And so, and even as adults, the way our parenting styles are different. And so there's 4 main ones that are talked about, but, and not that we have to label ourselves with these, but you hear of the authoritative parent, which this parent parenting style sets clear expectations with warmth and support. You have authoritarian, which is strict, less emotionally responsive, permissive, lenient, more responsive, and then uninvolved, distant or disengaged.
I feel like I was raised in the violent, emotionally responsive era. I don't know. I don't know where that fits in here. Mine was, very emotionally responsive and very very violent. And I think a lot of people who listen to our podcast, they're the products of the 80s.
The 80s,
they're 80s babies.
Like, I mean, you got the switch, man.
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, maybe you're not as effective as you maybe think you are or could be, because, I mean, my parents were all over the place, and I think I turned out just fine.
Right.
So,
but the point of what I'm trying to make is like we're all different, right?
Very
and so
different.
The way that we parent is different, and so I think this is where you and your spouse have to come together and understand how each of you parent. I am the strict one in our family. This guy right here next to me is the soft one, and you melt, you give in a lot.
I think it's situational. I am a lot of times very strict. I am a lot of times very, the voice of authority. But we're also raising kids, and they're getting to the age where, I tell her all the time, I'm like if you're constantly at a 10, our kids will get used to that. I said, if you're at a 2 with a weapon, they will start listening.
A weapon.
I'm telling you, grandmas of yesteryear had it down with the switches and the spoons, and they got things done.
Oh my gosh.
We do live in a different era now. My parents would have been in jail for the way they parented me. But it's different, and blended family is unique, and we're getting smarter as parents. We're raising smarter kids.
Yeah.
We're raising more emotionally responsive children.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with getting better at parenting. There's not just one way. But there are some common parenting conflicts. So discipline becomes key one.
Right.
Some people are disciplined through physical, where that's spanking or things like that. Some of them are more, hey, time out. Some people are yellers. Some people are positive reinforcers. Yeah. And because we're blended, we're having to navigate, what's the best style to implement.
Right.
I will say, as a step parent who parented a stepson, I was very cautious of the fact that physical discipline wasn't going to be a part of my parenting style,
right?
Because I thought that was overstepping my bounds, and I think his father would appreciate that not happening.
Right.
If I was co-parenting daughters, I think that would be different. So every situation is more unique and dependent upon the age of the children.
Right. And if it's, stepdad, stepdaughter, vice versa. And so, I think some other common parenting conflicts are screen time. We get this one a lot. Family routines and consistency. So what one parent and their kids did that was routine and consistent, or, structured, lack of structure, it could be very opposite to their new spouse and bonus kids. Division of labor and responsibilities. This is a big one inside the house. Emotional support for children in times of stress or conflict, and differences in expectations of behavior, how your children should behave in social settings and things like that. And so these are just common areas that we see a lot in blended families. And, we're going to give some practical advice for those things.
Yeah. So depending on where you are in your journey, maybe you're already married, maybe you're dating. I know we get people who listen to the podcast that are all over the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's never too late to sit down and create a parenting plan.
Yeah.
It's very simple. What kind of parent are you? And I think it's important each spouse understand how they were parented. I think those are conversations that a lot of times we don't have in the dating process of hey, what was discipline like for you? What worked for you? What do you think works for kids? What are we going to do in those situations? How are we going to parent? Whether that, and I think that's grouped by ages or grouped by child, is saying, hey, this is kind of the bounds that we're going to look at in these areas. This is kind of what I would like to do if those bounds are crossed. Is this okay with you? Do you feel differently?
Yeah, I think it's also having that conversation with your spouse or future spouse of what has worked, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
How does your child receive discipline best, and how do they receive criticism? I think you've got to get curious, you guys, and ask just a lot of deep questions, and because the more you know, the more that you can walk that out in a way that the kids are going to receive it, and it's going to be positive. And so you've got to get curious, ask the hard questions, get to know these kids, and get to know them through your spouse.
Well, and I think we see a lot of the problems, at least in the conversations we've had, is when, you have a single mom who's been parenting and been both mom and dad, and then all of a sudden they get married and there's obviously behavioral problems with the children.
Yeah. And
it's their resistance to allow authority or to allow discipline to come in.
Right.
And we talk about the priorities of marriage being God, our spouse, and our children. That's one of the biggest areas that all of a sudden puts children above spouse, is saying, hey, I don't like the way you discipline my children. And I can understand that. I mean, nobody probably likes that scenario the first time, your child gets yelled at by the stepdad. It's like, okay, whoa, hang on a second. I don't like that. But I think as parents, these are where communication's key. So what we don't want is heightened states of emotions where immediate discipline is levied and conversations are not had beforehand. So what does that mean? It means when the child does something that requires discipline, if it's something to the severe nature, I think it's important, and Vanessa and I did this a lot, is we would kind of go together, we'd go back in maybe our bedroom or something, and we'd have a conversation about, okay, this has happened. How do we want to deal with this?
Yeah.
How do we want to address this? And we would kind of be in coordination with what that looked like before we kind of levied the discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that created it said to the children, hey, these people are on a higher plane than I am in terms of making those decisions and that priority, and they are in unison with how they deliver that discipline. That is where I think good communication occurs. Yeah. The other side of this is if you do see discipline being levied, and maybe you don't agree with it right up front. Maybe you're kind of like, okay, I don't agree with that. You're not necessarily calling it out right there. You're not saying, hey, don't listen to him. This is what's going to happen. Because again, that puts a very clear message to your child that says, hey, I value you more than I value my spouse. Whereas if something happens and you don't like it, later on to have a conversation and go, hey, I think let's talk to me through your thought process here.
Yeah.
Why did you feel that way? Why did you do this? Why did you discipline like this? Because maybe there's something you didn't see.
Yeah. No, and I think something else to bring up with regards to this is that disciplining with little kids versus disciplining with like teenagers and older, I think it can look very different, because when you're beginning to blend and your kiddos are young, we talk about this in the book, is like letting the biological parent lead. Yes. Okay, well, at some point, if your kids are little, like we've got to get on the page together. And so yes, like you want to do that and establish so that trust is established. But over time, it's a thing where you can even sit the kids down and say, hey guys, like for foul language or whatever behaviors, as a family, we're deciding, or as parents together, this is going to be the punishment. You are going to do X, Y, and Z chores, or if you do X, Y, and Z, this is what it could look like. I think with teens, that can look very different if you're beginning to blend, because again, that trust isn't established, and they've had this parent who has been their authority for their entire lives. And so that can look like where it's like, hey, the biological parent is going to continue to, discipline them until they are out of the house. Now, where it gets tricky, and we've seen this before, is that it's, well, they discipline their kids easier than my kids, or harder. And so, again, that's where you have to have conversation. And I love everything that you just said, Scott, because you've got to be able to have that communication with your spouse to say, hey, I don't know that this was received well, or, hey, you did that really well. Support them in their wins too. Yeah. But you have to have those conversations.
Yeah, and you're not going to get it right every time.
No.
So, give yourself some grace and understanding that, you'll probably be right and wrong about equal amounts of times. Because a lot of times discipline is emotionally based. We're we're reflecting upon an emotional response, and whether that is, based out of fear. So if something happens and you're disciplined based on the fact that you were fearful that something bad would happen to that child, so we get a fear-based reaction. Sometimes we get a our well is empty type of reaction, meaning we're frustrated or we're in conflict, and so we're disciplined out of authority or power in those scenarios. And then sometimes you discipline out of the best intentions.
Yeah.
And those are good ones to learn from. I will say this, discipline needs to be present.
Yeah.
Because lack of discipline is not the answer. And so even if you're not on the same page, doing nothing is probably worse. So my advice and our counsel to you is, have those regular check-ins and get with somebody who can help you. If this is an area you struggle in and you consistently struggle, any area that you see happen over and over again is an area that says, hey, let's go get some help. Let's learn how to do this. There's nothing biological about learning how to or knowing how to parent. And I think that's one of the things that most people don't get is, even if you birthed a child, doesn't mean you know how to parent them. You need to learn. You have to learn these things. You can be taught better ways. So seek outside help. We're big proponents of counseling. Find a counselor. They're great people. You can tell them anything.
Yeah.
And
Blended
they'll
family
help you.
coaching. We have coaches to help with that. Again, open communication with your spouse. What are your non-negotiables?
Yeah.
For us and our little boys, Scott has some non-negotiables for the way that they speak to me, or, if I have to tell them to do something 5 times and, whatever that is, you guys have those open and honest conversations and be willing to be humble enough to say, hey, we're not making any progress in this area. We cannot agree on this. I think that we need to get some help. Like, let's have someone step in and help intervene and help us create a process or a parenting plan that we can put into practice that we can agree upon that has both of our ideas and execute this together.
I want to move towards self-governance. I feel like because when you have multiple kids, you guys know what I'm talking about here. Like something happens and you know it was caused by this group, but you don't know which one. I think you just punish them all, and eventually they'll start self-governing themselves. Like, don't do this. We all going to get punished. I haven't really moved that way yet, but I'm getting closer. Yeah. Guys, thank you guys for joining in today. Again, if you like this, if it touched you, we'd love to hear your comments. If you want to leave a podcast review, if you have more questions, maybe you have more questions than answers right now.
Or anything that's worked for you. Yeah. I think in this situation, you guys, tell us what's worked for you and your family. If you've been in this situation before and you struggled in this, but now you're like, hey, we did this and this thing worked for us and maybe it'll help you. So we want the community to engage and get involved with one another. And so be sure to share your thoughts as well.
Love it. Guys, hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey friends, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we talk about more blended family topics. Be blessed in all that you do, and remember, nothing will be impossible with God.